welcome to the stage the moderator of this session, Mr. Patrick Miller, the CEO of Ampere. Patrick, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lucian, for the introduction. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you all for taking your time and joining us today. Let's start by familiarizing ourselves with our tool. Take a look around, find the chat, and if nothing else, just start by telling us where you're located. I'd like to see where everyone's from. We're seeing some of those coming in right now. Please post all of your questions in the Q&A section, not in the chat. We'll try to monitor both, but it's much easier for us to catch it if it's in the Q&A section, and it'll make it easier for us to answer them. Some housekeeping things to be aware of. We are taking questions at the end, so again, put them in the Q&A tool. We'll catch them at the end, and we'll try to get as many answered as possible. The track's going to run 59 minutes total. We'll have you out of here on time, and it wouldn't be possible to run this virtual conference without our sponsors. Please take time to check them out. Go see what they're doing. They're all doing great things. And thank you to the sponsor of this session and sponsors of this session in particular, TX1 Networks and RMC. So with the housekeeping out of the way, the topic today is best practices to protect your industrial control systems. And I'm going to let the speakers introduce themselves. Let's start with Jim, and then go to James, and then go to Myron.
Great. Thank you very much. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. Appreciate your time invested in this session. My title is Director of Pre-Sales Engineering. We still good?
Oh, we're good. Keep going. Your background is.
Don't worry about that video. Just think about that video. My background is primarily in implementation of cybersecurity solutions in IT. I've spent the last 4 to 5 years in OT, looking at and implementing protection capabilities, protection strategies, and ICS types of environments. Again, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Hi, James.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. I often go by Jim, but to avoid confusion on this conference, I'm going by James. I've been doing cybersecurity work for about 26 years. Got out of college with a computer science degree, went right into cybersecurity, worked at a phone company, Sprint, doing IT type cybersecurity for the first part of my career, firewalls, VPN, access control, incident response, database security. Moved over to SRA, government contracting, after about 7 years, and got involved with computer network defense on the IT side. Did some software development with SAIC, introducing cybersecurity into a web database application. And then moved on to support the Marine Corps, doing blue team exercises, activities for securing their networks. And I've been at RMC for the last 10 years, where I've been focused on OT cybersecurity. Got involved with that when I was at Booz in the Marine Corps. And that's been the focus of my experience for the last 10 years, has been OT cybersecurity.
Fantastic. Let's finish up. Myra?
Hi, sorry, I just had a little difficulty unmuting. Nice to meet everyone. My name is Maura, and I've been working for the last 15, 20 years in the IT and security space, predominantly working in the energy and financial services, looking at advancing information security and risk management programs. Currently, I'm a cybersecurity consultant working for OLIS Cybersecurity Solutions. Very excited to be here. Very top of mind topic. Look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you all. We've got some brilliant people to ask some great questions today. With that, we'll kick it off. Maura, I'm going to start with you, and let's start with a kind of a broad overview of the threat landscape. So what are the latest threat trends impacting industrial systems, and how can companies stay ahead of them?
All right, thank you, Patrick. Great question. So at any point, feel free to any of the other panelists to jump in if I miss anything that's very important in this space. So basically, I think we all recognize that in general, we're seeing more adversaries conducting more cyber attacks using existing techniques, tactics, and procedures, and new tactics and procedures. The criminals are pretty innovative out there. I think one of the trends that a lot of people are talking about is how AI is helping with phishing. attacks, for example, a lot of the time, there was obvious tells and phishing emails. They're no longer there because people can finesse their attacks with AI. The other thing that's happening is ransomware. It's almost doubled this year on last year, which is pretty crazy. And it's crazy, but it's not surprising considering that now adversaries can leverage things like ransomware as a service and basically get playbooks to conduct attacks. So the barrier to entry is very low. In terms of the industrial space, manufacturing is the standout target for these ransomware attacks, and then other malicious attacks are also, increasing across other industrial spaces. We see it in the automobile production, power and energy, and electronics. And the other thing is, I mentioned phishing. Phishing is still, a big attack vector. And then, of course, business email compromise is, as well as supply chain. We also see crypto mining in the industrial space. And then remote access seems to be, a vector, again, unpatched vulnerabilities in file transfer or remote access systems. And then another thing that we're seeing out there is attacks are becoming more sophisticated. So now we see a combination of DDoS attacks, MFA, exploits, and then using AI as well for cyber and influence operations. Nation states, last year, there were more destructive attacks. This year, it seems to be more espionage based. And then in terms of the second part of this question, how do companies stay ahead of these responses? I think the key thing is incident response and resilience. You need to have a plan. You need to practice. The first time you're responding to these attacks should not be when you're having a live attack in your system. You need to exercise that muscle, right? And practice, while it doesn't always make perfect, it will definitely improve your recovery and response time frame, which will save you money at the end of the day, right? And maybe reduce any safety issues. And the other thing is, a lot of organizations in the industrial and non-industrial space don't have a great handle on their assets. So you need to make sure that you have a solid asset inventory, right? Because you can't protect what you don't know about. Defensible architecture is another important one, things like phish-resistant authentication, principle of least privilege. Like I mentioned, securing remote access is key. And then improving visibility into your ICS network. You need to be able to know what's going on, right? So logging, monitoring, looking at for anomalies, and then investigating when you see them, right? I'll end with just one key item I think that's really important, is that you should take a holistic approach when you're looking at securing OT assets, right? You need to work with your IT partners, or if you're within the same organization, that's probably easier. But I think that's pretty important, Patrick.
Fantastic. And that's a great overview. You mentioned a couple of things that I want to get some additional discussion on, and I'd rather have a full discussion than just, have these individual questions. So there's two things I'd like to have everybody provide a little bit additional feedback on, because they're front of mind, and I'm sure they're on everyone else's target list of bigger issues. Two of them, AI, and yes, it's been in phishing, but we're seeing it in other places as well. So are you seeing it in additional areas beyond just the ransomware phishing refinement efforts? And the second one is the global instability we're seeing with multiple wars happening in different geographic regions. How is that also affecting the industrial threat landscape? So with those two things, if I could have each of you, and Moira, could you start again? And we'll just go around with James and then Jim.
Okay, so in terms of the AI, so phishing, and then just to, your 6-year-old can go in and use AI to kind of build a playbook for, conducting an attack, right? So there's just the knowledge that AI provides. And then I think as AI becomes more sophisticated, it's going to become even more dangerous in this space, right? Because like we talked about the distributed denial of service attack, you can really kind of quick fire things off if you're using an AI to kind of run an attack. So then the second part of the question was around nation states and what's going on globally, right?
Yeah.
Still a lot of attacks back and forth between Russia and the Ukraine, right? Which is not is to be expected, right? Because they're at war. Then I've heard there's a lot back and forth between Hamas and Israel as well. And then in terms of China, which would be another key player in that space, right? I think the general consensus in the US is that the Chinese have infiltrated a lot of systems, but they're not taking any actions because it's kind of an insurance policy. Should anything happen in the future, then they could exploit those vulnerabilities at that point. Iran, I'm sure, is and maybe someone else can speak more to this. I don't know as much about Iran, but I'm sure that Iran is in there currently, targeting maybe even Israeli, infrastructure, etc. right now.
Okay. And James?
Good morning again. Thank you. With AI is going to make things much more efficient and easier for the lower level attackers. Currently, when we do penetration tests on operational technology, we have people that know how to write vulnerabilities, exploits, write that exploit code. What we can do is we can write that stuff much faster by working with AI to kind of tell it what we want to do and help us craft the exploit code. So AI has been a game changer in the fact that we can move much quicker. And then we can also use it to do tons of research, ask it specifically about, examples where people have exploited OT systems in the past. It's a lot easier, faster than Google. So it gives us the ideas there as well as producing playbooks on exactly how we're going to do our attacks. But the biggest thing we've seen is we are able to write exploit code much faster with the assistance of AI helping us write the scripts and knowing the language. We can move much faster, and it's going to allow less experienced attackers to be more efficient. As for wars, there's going to be a great impact with control systems because traditionally, we fight wars and the shore, the home front is safe. We have power, we have water, we have wastewater, we have all the comforts. But if you can attack and knock out somebody's electricity, knock out their water, knock out their wastewater, knock out things that they're using to run their missions, and it can be as trivial as knocking out their water, but then their data center that guides the missiles is run on an HVAC system that requires water for the cooling. So wars are definitely going to be an opportunity to exploit OT systems and cause kinetic impact without bullets and bombs. So I think it's just going to show that these systems really do need to be better secured.
Right. And Jim?
Yeah, thanks. Just to kind of add on to what's already been said, I mean, AI is prevalent across basically every form of infiltration tactics that we've seen, all the way from social engineering to deep fakes to, like James pointed out, just the ability to write code faster to make polymorphic malware exponentially grow across regions. We're seeing it very prevalently across many, many different attack vectors, if you will. A lot of that focus is still on IT, especially when you talk about social engineering, you talk about the deep fakes, getting someone to click on something. It's becoming, it's very good, right? It's very intriguing, very enticing. So it's just exploiting that angle even further into the social engineering types of capabilities that malware and spam currently engage. As far as the wars, the current instability, we're seeing a huge uptick across all sectors, but primarily critical infrastructure. I think James pointed out the critical infrastructure aspect. It's a lot easier to hack into a system and disable functionality than it is to send 1,000 guys to go break something in the field. So from that aspect, huge uptick. A number of examples And some of the wars that we're seeing is, attacking critical infrastructure power grids, attacking critical infrastructure supply chain, even for manufacturing. So there's a number of areas that are areas of focus, if you will, for those attacks. But it's just the ease of simplicity, right? And we're seeing a huge uptick across the globe in those types of attacks.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned and Mara as well mentioned the manufacturing sector. It is, from a ransomware perspective, I think September was the world record month ever for the highest number of ransomware successful hits.
Yeah.
In addition to the critical manufacturing components that go into a lot of the defense industrial machinery for the global warfare operations, they're beginning to hit, key manufacturing components to disrupt those supply chains. So that yes, there are also attacks on infrastructure, but even those attacks can cause severe disruptions for some of these operations. So
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay, Jim, I'm going to go to you next. Shifting gears a little bit. And I do see the questions about some SOC, and thanks, Daniel, for the mention of IT. Yes, there's going to be some commingling of IT and OT, because the reality is most of the attacks we've seen, and I think the panelists will agree, start on the IT side and in some way, shape, or form, if not directly, but indirectly have an impact on them. So Jim, I'm going to go to you next. So let's talk about, as we mentioned, this IT-OT mix, this IT-OT convergence. It's been an overused term. This means a lot of things to a lot of different people. What do you think this means? What does it mean to you? What do you think it means to everyone else? And is this still a current trend? Is this still a thing? Is it still happening? Where is it going?
Yeah. At the basic level of IT-OT convergence, it was really about data, right? The ability to share data, the ability to integrate data into IT operations to be more efficient in those types of procedures. It's really, some people talk about it like, or some people mention that we shouldn't talk about it at all anymore. It's already happened. It's done. It's really not. I mean, it's ongoing, right? When you look at IT-OT convergence, there's a number of things that still have to happen, and I really compare where ICS types of environments are right now to cloud infrastructure 15 years ago. We know it exists. We know we need to protect it. We're not sure how to get there. We have separate silos for IT protection. We have separate silos for OT protection. We're not sure really how to protect OT environments still. So that's part of that convergence that needs to happen between the IT and OT organizations, is breaking down the silos internally between the IT and OT operations, bringing and delivering specific solutions that may have been developed in IT, but are really specific to OT, because there's a number of different functional, operational requirements in OT that aren't seen in IT. So part of that convergence really has to be about breaking down those organizational silos, implementing a cohesive cybersecurity strategy across the entire enterprise, not just focusing on IT. Although I will say, one thing you mentioned before was the bleed over from IT and OT for ransomware. Extremely prevalent. I've seen numbers up over 90% that ransomware discovered in OT environments is actually bleed over from IT. So that's something else we need to solve, right? But we need to get together, and we need to get the people together within the organization to complete that convergence cycle, because it's really about, again, breaking down those silos, bringing the IT, OT organizations together in a more cohesive nature to actually implement a strategy that's going to satisfy the requirements across that industry.
Yeah, fantastic. Other panelists to add?
Yep, sorry about that. I was slow coming off my mute. But yeah, I would agree. There is the OT IT convergence going on, and I was going to talk about OT practices and cybersecurity practice a little bit coming up. But the IT OT convergence is definitely not fully integrated and completed yet. Currently, when I go into a lot of organizations, I still see two SOCs. One to manage the IT environment and one to manage the OT environment. In my opinion, you can't do that. You have to have the complete picture, and you have to have plans and playbooks that work together. You can't have one for IT. You can't have one set of rules for OT. You have to have one set of rules for everybody. So the convergence is very important, and it's ongoing. But I would by no stretch say that it's well down the path of being successful yet. But it does have to happen.
Yeah, I would like to add You mentioned the integrated SOC. I absolutely agree, because without that full picture, it's really hard to see the trajectory of a threat actor moving through your full landscape. I'm also starting to see the integration of physical security components in there as well. So because physical security is now all a bunch of digital technology, where it used to be real physical things, it's all digital now, whether it's through camera or other forms of analytics, and many of the other controls from the physical world are now integrated in there as well. And then the dependencies between the OT and the IT side, I think that's where we're seeing a lot of this bleed over, as Jim mentioned, where you've got an impact on the IT side that finds its way into the OT side. We've got to find a way to actually island off and still operate without that feed from the IT side into the OT world. And maybe that's operational telemetry coming out for some business operations, but I've had a good friend of mine, Mark Bristow, calls it turtle mode, where you just clamp down the shell and wait for the danger to pass, and then you can open up again and start moving. But yeah, great points.
So Patrick, actually on that
Yeah.
same note, I think the trend from an organizational perspective as well is that more CISOs are getting responsibility for OT security as well. So that's
Yes.
kind of forcing the collaboration and everything else. I think that's quite interesting.
Great point.
And then the other thing you hit on, the physical security, AI has been used massively for the last number of years in the physical security side, right?
Yeah, extensively.
Yeah.
It's been everything from different forms of like plate detection, facial recognition, and the correlation of those things. And we're even starting to see AI and other correlation mechanisms being used to say, Mara logged into her workstation in the corporate office, but she also badged into a facility that's 100 kilometers away at the same time. So those two things effectively would constitute a potential threat.
And probably the challenge moving forward for AI is to get all that data from all of those systems and put it somewhere so that you can analyze it, right, and
Yes.
predict based on it, right?
Yes.
Be very powerful when all of that's ready.
Yes, absolutely agree. And that goes to Rashid's question about the integration of AI into your SOC, as well as integrating your SOC from your different security components. Okay, I'm going to go to James for the next question. And let's talk about some of these organizational challenges and some more in-depth discussion on the OT specifics. What are the challenges organizations encounter when they try to establish an OT cybersecurity practice or team?
Yeah, and following up what we were just discussing with the convergence, you don't want to just tell your IT cybersecurity staff that they're now in charge of the OT environment and go do what they were doing on the IT side as well. There's inherent differences between IT and OT. The systems on the OT side were built decades ago in some cases, and cybersecurity was not a big thought when they were built. There's diverse technology on the OT world. On the IT side, we're kind of stuck with Microsoft and some flavors of Linux, Unix, but that's mostly what we encounter. But on the OT side, you got hundreds of different manufacturers making thousands of different models of equipment that do similar things. You also have different priorities. On the IT side, we want to protect and defend and keep confidential our workings. On the OT side, we're more interested in the operational uptime and keeping our system running and functional. And then you need people with skills if you're going to stand up an OT cybersecurity practice. Been doing this for 10 years. I got into it because there was a lack of people that could help out at the job I was at. So the skill set is different. You need people that understand cybersecurity and control systems, and a combination that is becoming more readily available, but is still something you need to focus on when you're going for your OT cybersecurity practice. OT and IT have grown up differently. IT, I got in, I was 20 years ago doing cybersecurity. I was living, breathing cybersecurity every day. People that got into control systems were worried about processes and the functionality of the control system and making sure that it works. When we show up now, well into their career, well into the technology living out in the world, and tell them, hey, you need to change the way you're doing things and you need to focus on cybersecurity. It's a bit of a different culture. And we need to appreciate the fact that they're more concerned with keeping the systems up. So you have to implement cybersecurity in a way that is usable and effective for them. You also have different regulatory and guidance and frameworks out there. So going back to the IT convergence, I'd like to see frameworks come together more going forward, so that IT and OT can both operate together on the same playbook. And then you have budget constraints. A lot of times there's not a separate line item for OT cybersecurity, which I think there always should be, but it's hard to justify a big budget for OT cybersecurity. You have a production line that's been working for 20 years, and now I'm telling you got to spend $1 million to do cybersecurity on something that's already been functioning and doing its job for 20 years. It's kind of a hard sell. On IT, you can sell it with a new service. Hey, you're going to get a new website and a new database. It's going to be faster. You're going to have better connectivity. The customers are going to see a vast improvement in this. And it bundled in that new technology, that new service usually is a line item for cybersecurity to protect that IT side. So when you're starting a practice, that's kind of the stuff that you have to think about to make the process go smoothly. Those are the key points. There's a million. The devil's in the details. There's a million smaller items.
Fantastic points. Maura, I'll go to you next. Do you have anything to
add? No, actually, just totally agree with what James has said.
Fantastic.
It's a challenge. It's a very different operating model. I guess one thing I could add is that it feels like cyber is really trying to tie risk to dollars in order to justify those budgets for those initiatives. I'm not sure if I see anything happening in the OT space around that, right? And maybe that's something that they could borrow from the cyberspace that could help them with any funding challenges.
Jim?
Oh yeah, it was just to Moira's point. It's the cost associated with downtime, right, is the biggest motivator for any manufacturer. That's actually that's one of the things we do as part of the evaluation is looking at, well, if something does happen to the system, what is your loss per hour? What is your productivity per hour loss? It's really a linear number for manufacturing because they know down to the second how much they're losing if that line goes down. So that cost incentive is definitely there to Mark's point.
Yeah, loss prevention is often the biggest motivator. And out of all the ones that I've seen, out of all the different organizations and different industries that I've seen, the most highly functioning security teams on the OT side, they know dollars per second of downtime. That is like a key fact. You can tell right away the level of maturity of those organizations across the field, way above anyone else. So if you want to know like the secret sauce to getting some motivators, find out that metric. That is key. Yeah. And James, you mentioned something about the skills, and I want to kind of touch on that just a little bit. Just from what I've seen, maybe it's the world I live in, but there are not enough people to do the jobs that we have out there to get this done effectively, period. And there's a lot of arguments as to what this is. Is it a true like workforce gap? Is it a skill gap? Is it that we're just not asking for the right things in our HR positions? We're saying it's entry level, but it requires like God level programming and 50 certs and 15 years of experience, yet it's entry level. What is the key to actually getting these skills, the right people in the right seats at the right time?
Yeah, and we've been trying to tackle this problem at RMC on how we find new professionals and how we build professionals that can come into this world and function safely and effectively in the cybersecurity role. We've tried to figure out, is it better to take a cybersecurity person and teach them the control system aspects, or is it better to take a control system person and teach them the cybersecurity aspects? And we've had good success with both. So, I couldn't tell you that one's better than the other, but what is important is that somebody has both those skill sets and has an understanding. You can't implement cybersecurity controls on a control system not understanding what the impact's going to be. You have to know what the control system is doing, how it's doing it, how it's running a real-time operating system, and is only focused on one thing as opposed to a Windows machine that's multitasking and has a great deal of user interaction. We do a lot of on-the-job training. So what we do is we look for people that are sharp in one or the other field, and we bring them in and we give them 3 to 6 months to build up that other capability. And then we have them work in kind of a mentor relationship to establish themselves. And then after about a year, we were comfortable letting them go out and do things on their own without the mentor's oversight. But it takes us that long to build that skill set. Unfortunately, we do pay a little bit more for people with those skill sets and that talent. So it makes it harder when we're just trying to recruit, when we're trying to compete for IT specific work, because our people are more expensive. But it's the understanding that they have to have both skill sets. And organizations and colleges are jumping on teaching people cybersecurity and building the control system, the OT side into it. I know Idaho has up by INL has a great program. INL itself with DHS offers great training to kind of close the gap between people with different skill sets. So it's not just ITOT, it's ITOT control systems.
Yeah.
And I just add to that, Patrick, that I think maybe this is an opportunity for AI as well, right? To automate some of these, or take care of some of these more repetitive tasks, and then be an advisor to that agent or to that person that's working, securing the systems, right? To James's point earlier, I think 0.3% of the entire world can code, right? And AI can take that number, right, and make it 100% if they care or interested. So I think that's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, it does take the coding skill set and at least gives a significant foundation so they can take a piece of it and then add. Yeah, and Jim, anything?
Yeah, the people, just to touch on what James said, the people problem. I'll call it a problem because the skill set is definitely different between IT and OT, as James pointed out. And that's one of the main points of friction we find when we go into an environment, when we go into implementing solutions in OT, is the pushback you get from the OT side saying, you don't understand my environment, you're not putting that on my systems, you're not interrupting my network. There's a lot of pushback, and that goes to the point of that cross training, right? Hey, the OT guys need to understand cybersecurity, but the IT cybersecurity guys really need to understand not only the processes and procedures of OT, but also the language, right? What the systems are doing, how they can affect downtime, how they can affect tipping over systems when they want to reboot them. You just can't go in and reboot systems, right? It's an understanding, and it's a cross training opportunity for sure in any organization.
It is. And one of the interesting components I've seen on the OT side is it's not just about the differential and the technologies, right? On the IT side, you've got your standard workstation server database, these typical technologies. They're often refreshed within 3 to 5 years for the latest and greatest, and they keep up to the, whatever the cutting edge of technology is. In the OT space, you get to do that. And you also get to deal with RTUs, PLCs, relays, FEPs, IEDs, RTACs, RDAS, and Windows NT. XP, CE, so your breadth of the and linear span of time that you've got to deal with as well in terms of antiquated technologies and new technologies. So sure. It does create a really, really interesting mix of necessary skill sets. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go to Moira next, and let's talk about industry collaboration and information sharing. And this is more a discussion, let's say, I want to talk about collaboration, information sharing among the industry players and how that really enhances the situation. But can you come at it from two different perspectives? Let's talk about industry to industry sharing. So like players within the same space sharing with each other, and then those players sharing with other outside parties, such as government agencies, insurance firms, and what that looks like. How is this helping?
Okay, so there is massive benefits to collaboration and information sharing within, the cybersecurity space, right? Early detection, faster response. You see companies like resource pooling, recently there's been a number of cyber attacks. I mean, the SolarWinds probably is a good example of all the different players coming to the table, and you had technology companies, you had industry, you had government, everyone working together to figure this out, right? the other thing is, it helps with standardization and best practices. You can lobby, you can create policy, you can get government and regulatory support, right? I think most organizations recognize, the benefits of industry-wide incident exercises or tabletops, right? I think it's GridX in the electric space. Obviously, the training, the continuous improvement, they're just massive benefits. Everyone should be aware of, the benefits of collaborating within the industry and then outside of it, right? So if you don't have a cyber program or you need to build a cyber program, there's all these resources out there that can help you, right? If you're strapped for money and you can't build out a threat intelligence function, right, you can use CISA or some other government organization. So there's a lot out there for collaboration within the US, right, globally. NIST, ISO, the MITRE ATT&CK framework, OWASP, phenomenal resources out there that I would, if you're a smaller organization, you can get very far faster leveraging these resources. So that's from within the industry. And then the second part of that question was outside of, with sharing information across other entities. I think probably you're all familiar with the SEC rules right now, where if you're a publicly traded company, you have to report breaches, right? I think that's a step in the right direction. I think probably organizations get a little bit of heartburn from that rule, but I think overall it benefits everyone. It's like when I was talking about the ransomware attacks earlier, right? So predictions are that it's like 50% more than last year, but people don't really know because not everyone is publicly disclosing this information. So I think that it would be better for everyone if we actually had a true sense of what's going on out there and people did share more openly. But that comes with a price. And that's one of the things that we didn't really talk about earlier, is that a lot of these, breaches and cyber incidents end up with increased product prices for the consumer, right? So we think, anyone have anything else to add there? Sorry.
Yeah. Jim, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is you hit on a point that kind of drives me nuts. And that's not only information sharing between industries, but information sharing between security vendors. I mean, we really need to get together on this. And I know that's it's business practices and intellectual property, and but if we want to make progress against and try and get ahead of, which we've never been in a position ahead of a bad actor, we really need to share information on not only on a intellectual level, but also on a infrastructure level, right? Just the ability to I don't know what the word for it is, interconnect devices within an environment, to share data within the environment, to create a cohesive strategy, protection strategy within an environment. Something I push for, but it's pushing a big boulder uphill. So,
yeah, I agree. James?
Yeah, I was just going to add that I really like frameworks, and there's a couple different OT cybersecurity frameworks out there, and I think that it's important that that we make those better, and that people work to provide input and feedback to those frameworks, and that there should be working groups, industry-wide working groups around those frameworks, so that we're all marching to the same plan. We all have the same plan at the end of the day, and the collaboration and conversation and crafting of the framework is really how we get there, in my opinion.
Yeah, great point, James.
Yeah, big fan of frameworks. You can't manage what you're not measuring, and you should be measuring against a framework. It's the best way to show your current position and how you're progressing, whether good or bad. Yeah, someone mentioned a framework like 62443. Mara, you mentioned NIST. Honestly, they're all good frameworks. It's all the same controls. They're just mixed up a different way, and they're called something else, and they're in different vertical buckets. So pick one of them and just start measuring. That's the key.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I guess that speaks to the compliance piece of it too. And I think someone asked about a question around compliance, and compliance doesn't equal security, right? It's great to be compliant, but just because you're compliant doesn't, you can't always stop there. You have to tailor things to your own environment, right?
Yeah. That compliance effectively is the floor, not the ceiling.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, my next question, checking time, is for James. And someone mentioned zero trust in the question, so if you can weave that in as well. Although let's at least address the fact that zero trust means 10 things to 11 people, or what is the other way around? 11 things to 10 people. So let's talk about defense in depth and its importance to OT systems, including concepts like zero trust and zones and conduits and that approach. So what are you seeing as like the most effective method here?
Yeah, and I mean, defense in depth is a key concept for OT cybersecurity. It's been tried and proven in the IT world. It's what you need to quickly move and have backups to some defenses. You use it to mitigate vulnerabilities that can't otherwise be corrected on systems. It really gives you the protection, and it has to be incorporated into your OT cybersecurity posture. There's inherent vulnerabilities on OT systems that can't be fixed. Sometimes it could be that's the way the system's supposed to work. You can't cause a safety system to not introduce a denial of service to your manufacturing if it triggers a true incident. So by design, that system causes the denial of service. You inherently cannot stop that from happening. So you have to figure out ways to prevent a vulnerability from being exploited to make it think that something bad is happening on the production system. And you do that through defense in depth. You need to make sure you have good visibility and monitoring of what your system is. You have to know what your system is, the pieces and components that make it up, and how it operates. So bringing in items like enclaving the network, zero trust, they're all great defense in depth structure to build that hard shell, so that something's got to traverse a complex environment before it can actually hit home, deliver its payload to your control system. So I think the idea of defense in depth needs to mirror IT environments, and it absolutely has to be established for the OT world. And it's going to cover items like risk assessments, physical security, network segmentation, firewalls, VPNs, DMZs, removing internet access, and some sort of strategy on patch management for the control systems themselves. And then start building your defense in depth simply. Don't start, zero trust is great, but that wouldn't be the first control I put on my OT network. Start simple, start at the ground floor and build up to where you're getting to a zero trust environment on your OT environments.
Agreed. Moira, anything to add?
Sorry, just had a difficulty coming off mute. No, I would totally agree with James. Or maybe the one thing I would stress is managing identities, right? There's been a lot of issues recently with breaches around identity providers. So how do you, maybe that's building on the zero trust, right? Don't trust any person, don't trust any device. And how do you improve upon the identity management piece of it?
Jim?
Nothing really to add. Just maybe context around zero trust and what it means to like cybersecurity or prevention provider. Easy for me to say. Basically, you're just establishing the fact that mentally my environment's already compromised. So now, how do I segment? How do I protect? What's the most critical asset? So it's really about a mindset of approaching and looking at your environment. So just break it down to the simplest form factor, right? If I'm already compromised, what steps do I need to take to protect my environment? And to James's point, you can't just go in and blanket protect an environment, especially in ICS/OT types of environments. It's about prioritizing, not only prioritizing, but also identifying what's in your environment, and then going out and creating a logical plan to protect that environment.
Fantastic. Okay, we're getting down to 5 minutes or so less. I'm going to jump over to the Q&A if that's okay with the panelists. And since we're gonna do this in like lightning round, rapid fire, so keep your answers in 20 words or less. Okay, let's go with the one at the top here from Yash. What is the most in-demand side of cybersecurity in terms of commercial, industrial, or corporate field? Is it offensive or defensive or a mixture of both? Basically, red team, blue team, or purple? just jump in.
I'll jump in and say
James?
my experience has been that it's defensive. Right now, it is getting OT systems to a baseline, nice cybersecurity posture, and then the OT world, the offensive world comes in and tries to validate the cybersecurity defenses that you've put in place. But I've seen a greater demand for the defensive side at the current time.
Fantastic.
Yeah, for sure, defensive, and that's part of that strategy when it comes to identifying and prioritizing what you want to protect, and creating that cohesive strategy of protection. Not only that, but segmentation can't be overstated either. You really need to segment the environment to prevent any type of lateral movement.
Yeah, agreed. Defensive, and just building on the segmentation, I think even micro segmentation now, right?
Yeah, we're seeing that as well. Okay, just going through here. Okay, we've answered some of these in the webinar already. Things like the mindset of this IT SOC analyst versus an OT SOC analyst. I think it's going to have to be both. You may have some people that lean one way or the other. Anything to add there?
IT versus OT SOC analyst. You absolutely need them both. You need those skill sets. I wouldn't say that fundamentally they're doing a different job. They're looking for intrusions. They're hunting on their networks for signs of previous intrusion. They have some core concepts that they keep at a high level. When you get down to the incident response, depending on what level of SOC analyst they are and what level of incident response they're going to be doing, you always want to make sure you have somebody that's a SME on the equipment they're working on. Don't try to defend something and patch it if you can't fix it. So that's kind of words we live by. If you can't fix it, maybe hold off. But at the high level, I think, or entry level or basic level of SOC, I think they're the same. When you get to higher levels, that's where you need SMEs on the equipment that they're working. If they're OT, IT, maybe Microsoft. If they're OT, maybe have a Rockwell, a knowledge base with that person.
Yeah. And I think differentiation for me, especially between IT and OT, is understanding anomalous behavior in an OT environment. What shouldn't happen? That valve should not be closing. That pressure should not be above this point. So it's a little bit of different understanding about the environments, but more specific knowledge about anomalous types of events.
Yeah, I would just add that if organizations aren't cross-training IT, OT, security folks, they should consider it seriously, right? Whether it's job shadowing or I don't know, creating a training program. I think if they understand each other's work better, they can understand the synergies, right? And they can understand the risk better, and then they can better protect the organization. It's a win-win situation.
For sure.
Okay, and I'm going to force a really difficult situation at the very end. We got a minute left. Patching has been mentioned several times. It's also a question in the Q&A section. I'm just going to throw an idea out there and debate me. If it's touching an external network, yes, it should be a candidate for patching. And then it goes into like a now, next, or never category based on when you can do it or what the impact of the process would be, like up or down vote on the panelists.
I would agree that you patch what you can, and then you go with priority. You have a risk management process that tells you where to best spend your money. You can't fix everything.
Yeah, agreed. Patch what you can, implement intrusion prevention on the vulnerabilities that you know about, and go from there.
Yeah, totally agree as well.
All right. Okay. Well, I may have got my timer wrong. Panelists, correct me. Okay. I might have my offset on my timer wrong. So I apologize for that. We're going to go back to the questions to the panelists. My mistake. I'm a terrible moderator. Shame me. Yes.
Time is relevant. It's fine.
I know I have my little stopwatch going on, and I started it when we got into our green room. So yeah, that's bad moderator skills there. Okay, so I've got a really good list of questions for you guys. So we have no shortage of great things to discuss. We've talked about some protection capabilities that are different between IT and OT, but I'm going to go to Jim and have you elaborate a little bit on the different protection capabilities, like what are you using for protection technologies, processes on the IT side versus the OT side, with more of a focus on the OT differential, like what's more effective there that may be different from the IT side?
Yeah, and this goes back to a lot of what we talked about previously about the the operating systems you're protecting, the capabilities you're protecting, the behavior of the systems themselves and what they're doing. And generally, when you get into ICS types of environments, it's a lot of repetitive processes. So it's fairly easy to identify anomalous types of behavior. But moving forward in a protection strategy, that should be part of your protection strategy, but also the ability to protect specific applications, specific protocols. Again, very different from IT and OT, right? You have unsecure protocols running rampant in OT. But it's really about understanding that environment, implementing protection strategies that is and are designed for, not air-gapped, I won't use that word, although it's just a reference, right? There very few air-gapped environments exist anymore. But protection designed for isolated environments, if you will, that don't necessarily have open internet connectivity. I mentioned intrusion prevention before. That's got to be a critical part of that protection strategy. And it's really just about understanding and implementing protection capabilities that are specific to ICS OT types of environments, rather than trying to shoehorn an IT type of solution into the environment that, I mentioned before, may cause reboots, may cause downtime, may cause, odd behavior of applications or block applications from executing. It's really about understanding the environment you're going into and creating and deploying products that are designed specifically for that environment.
Okay, so for example, you can't run antivirus on a relay, right? So what are some of the protection capabilities we're looking at in the OT space? If I can't use whitelisting or AV or some of the standard IT-based controls, what would be like, at least hit these top three things in the OT side to try to get some level of protection? Is it like, system hardening where you've removed services? Is it, network-based anomaly detection? What are some of these capabilities you're looking for?
Yeah, and great point on the basic blocking and tackling, right?
Yeah.
Hygiene, number one. I mean, repetitive or shared administrative credentials. There's a number of things you can do just in the basic hygiene category that will improve your security posture. If you cannot put an agent type of protection strategy in, then I would strongly look at network capabilities, where you're controlling communication to the device, you're controlling protocol communication specific to what that protocol can do between devices. Going back to segmentation, a micro-segmentation, that's a huge part of it. Who can talk to who in the environment? That's part of that protection strategy. And it's also part of your ability to control your environment, right? From not only lateral movement, but also from bleed over from IT. If IT can't talk to a specific device, they can't download malware or do command and control to that specific device. So I just moved to network when you're talking about things that can't be protected with an agent-based protection capability. Then we moved to network-based capabilities. But again, specific to OT environments. So we need to understand the OT protocols. We need to understand the traffic. We need to understand what's normal and what's not normal. So that's part of that protection strategy. And also understanding the environment and prioritizing your protection capabilities in the environment.
Yeah. Maura?
I would just add, a lot of whilst the solutions in the cyberspace mightn't be directly applicable, a lot of the guidelines, right? Principle of least privilege, for example, locking down access, I think, the cyber physical attack kind of scenario is probably one of the hardest to address, right, in the OT industrial side of things. So lock your assets down, right? And then actually, one of the things that I came across recently that I thought was an interesting application of AI was using AI to determine asset ownership. Because, some of these assets, we know they're old, they are, out somewhere. People don't even know how they're configured anymore. unfortunately. So figuring out, who's accessing those assets, who technically can you go talk to? Who is that SME for that random, asset that's out in the field somewhere, right? Who knows about it? So I thought that was quite interesting. So
yeah, there's an interesting mix of co-owned, co-maintained, co-managed, co-this, co-that, and it's nice to get some degree of who do you go to when you need an issue resolved. Yeah,
that's just,
James?
Three things, and I'm not sure which order I put them in, but knowing, controlling, and hardening. Knowing what your system is, the parts and components, and how it operates. Knowing the traffic that you see, and what's anomalous. All of a sudden, your system starts rebooting. How should you implement a playbook to start responding to that? It could be it's just rebooting, or it could be some sort of a cyber attack. The good thing with OT environments is they're extremely static. A thermostat tells a PLC what the temperature is twice a day, and it checks in very regularly on when it does that. And all of a sudden, if it asks the Kerberos server for the password file, something's up, and you can respond pretty quickly to some kind of suspicious behavior like that. Controlling physical access, controlling role-based access control, limiting what people can do, and then hardening, which we've talked about, building that defense in depth, building that a patching cycle, building those mitigations for vulnerabilities that can't be patched.
Right, and we've all touched on this, but I'd like to talk just a little bit more about it. And Moira touched on it really early on in the conversation. Is about architecting for defense, but also architecting for visibility. Let's say you've inherited some legacy environment, and you may not have a method to get that kind of telemetry or visibility, the security telemetry that you're looking for. How do you get to that state where you can do that level? Because we talk about it, but it's easier said than done. For example, in a very large manufacturing or generation plant, for example, you got upwards of 1,000 devices in some situations. How do you get that potential east-west visibility when you're looking at point-to-point SCADA protocols that just don't do that like IP does?
Well, and I want to make it more complicated. When you're trying to figure out all of the parts of your system and have visibility, you have IP-based networks, and then you have serial-based networks. And there are not a lot of great ways to keep a good visibility on what's going on in your serial networks. It gets more complicated too in the fact that there's RF communication taking place outside of traditional Wi-Fi. So to have that visibility, you can't just go in and say we're going to monitor IP, TCP, IP, UDP traffic, and then we're going to monitor Wi-Fi. There is a whole nother world what you're trying to keep visibility on the OT environment and the way that it operates. With that said, going back to the fact that it's a static environment is good. And then there's ways that you can figure out your assets, not just on an IT network where you ping everything and see what you get responses from. You can actually dig into a PLC's config file and get a good understanding of what everything is on that network, both serial and IP based, because that PLC knows what it is because it's using it to function and operate.
Yes.
I don't know if that answers how you architect the solution.
Close, yeah.
Yeah, visibility. It's hard work, quite honestly, especially if you're going into a brownfield environment or environment that already exists, that you're walking into it cold and you need to understand what's in that environment. It's a lot of work. Starting with, pad and pen, pad and pencil, get it out of the shop floor and identifying things, but also, there's a lot of tools out there that can assist you. But yeah, it's just starting. Just start somewhere.
Yeah. All right.
Now we might be out of time.
Yeah, no, we're close.
Couldn't agree more. I won't say too much, but totally agree with James and Jim on the approach to that. It takes work. It's not easy, right? But sometimes the hard thing is the right thing to do, right? Yeah,
just get started. Get started and get moving. All right, we are at the end of the hour. We're going to hand it back to Lucian and team from IIoT to take us to the next session. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you, panelists, so much for your insight and your wisdom and your answers. We'll work on my timing skills next time for the moderation component. I can operate many things, but apparently not a timekeeper. But fantastic. Thank you, everybody, and have a fantastic morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you may be.
Thank you.
Take care.
Goodbye all.